Am I contented with what God has done for me in my life, or do I want more? And if I want more, what does that say about me? Is the faith being revealed or exposed?
Hey, what's going on? This is Brett Snodgrass with another episode of the Iron Deep podcast. And today I have Pastor Owen Williams on with me today. What's going on, Owen?
Not a thing. Thanks once again, as I said to you, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And I'm meeting for the first time, and I'm excited to see what we're going to be talking about.
Yes, definitely, guys. This is the show that I'm excited about. I know you guys are going to be excited about it. It's really hitting the heart of all of our listeners, hitting the heart of me as well. I want to introduce Mr. Pastor Owen Williams. And Owen, I know you served as a senior pastor of the St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church for 17 or so years. You've also been the director of pastoral care services at New York's Kings County Hospital. You hold degrees in pastoral counseling, criminal justice, and an honorary doctorate of divinity. You're an author that we're going to talk about. You have a series of books called The Corporate Christian, and which really just explores what we love to talk about: the intersection of faith, corporate culture, and spiritual warfare. And just love to dig into all that. So thank you for being on the show, Pastor. Welcome. And I like to ask a lot deeper questions. So I'm going to kind of start with this one. So you've written this series of books, The Corporate Christian. And so I want to ask you, like, you've been a pastor for most of your life, but you decided this particular book, The Corporate Christian. I want to ask, what was maybe your encouragement to write this particular book? What did you want people to kind of get out of this series of books, The Corporate Christian?
Uh, the first book came about, I always tell people it comes about out of pain. And that pain is that, when you are a Christian and you get a good job in corporate America, you tell everybody God has blessed you, and God has opened doors and the windows of heaven, and He's blessed you. And the reality is, and that is true. But 6 months later, when you're having difficulty on those jobs and you're having personality clashes and conflicts, and is that still a blessing?
Mm,
And the book was written to highlight and identify for Christians to navigate the corporate environment. So the first one was called The Corporate Christian: Christian Beliefs versus Corporate Behaviors. There's a duality of your being when you're in the corporate setting. And one must be faithful, rendering to Caesar what is Caesar's and rendering to God what is God's, in a sense. And you have to really understand what that is, and you can't be thin-skinned from that process. And you may not get the credit for the work you've done, and somebody else may advance. And uh, I think sometimes Christians in the corporate environment have to understand that the blessing is not for you to now climb the corporate ladder. That's your own ideology that you're trying to do. But the blessings for you is God promised us one thing, that He would provide.
mm,
And the job is for provision, one. And two, you have an opportunity to share your faith in whatever manner is comfortable to you: behavior, peace, integrity, maybe some witnessing if it's allowed, in your countenance, and your support of your coworkers. And that is a process that you grow to, because you will go through some challenging times, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an employee, whether you're a director, a vice president. You'll go through some challenging times on that job, and your behavior will reveal how deep your faith is, or
mm.
expose how deep
Yeah.
your faith is.
Yes. Yes. That's so true. I know as a business owner, there's so many different challenging moments. We're leading teams. We're putting other families' food on the table. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of peaks and valleys, a lot of blessings and good times, but also a lot of challenging times. And yes, it will either um, tell you how deep your faith is or expose it. one of my friends says, and you mentioned this a little bit, but whose kingdom are we building? And I think I've been around a lot of men, and as we mentioned before this podcast, these circles of men, very successful men, owning businesses or real estate or whatever it is. I'm mostly in the real estate industry, uh, but he would always say, "Whose kingdom are you building? Are you building?" There's only two kingdoms. There's God's kingdom, and then there's not God's kingdom.
Right.
And I think we all can. There's all this tug of war of like which kingdom are we building, right? And you talked about that a little bit. Can you elaborate on that of seeing, you mentioned pain. What are some of the pain points and the challenges that you saw as a pastor looking in at someone in the corporate world? What were some of those challenges and pains? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, first, for me, it was a blessing to be a pastor and an employee because it sharpens you on both sides. You understand discernment as a pastor, and then you understand humility and submission as an employee.
Mm,
So it really builds you completely, as James 1:1 says. Count it all joy. But at the same time, pain helps you grow. Once again, going back to James, because it teaches you patience, and that patience comes about from you absorbing disappointments. Disappointments are supposed to spur thinking in reference to the question you said: Why am I here? You know, and am I contented with what God has done for me in my life, or do I want more?
mm,
And if I want more, what does that say about me? And what I've come to realize, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do believe that people need to, one, understand that we are still sinners saved by grace, and the sin of man is always going to be there, and the beauty of your faith is that in spite of the sin of man, you can still demonstrate great compassion, you know, great empathy, great discernment, great assertiveness, uh, because they can coexist
mm,
together. I think the Apostle Paul said that he came to realize that whenever he tried to do some good things, he saw something in him that he had no power over that led him to do some evil things or think some
mhm.
evil things.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned being a business owner, and you pay people. I've also had some businesses myself. And sometimes you find your employees are not appreciative of the hard work that you're doing to keep contracts going. And they're not moving at the same pace as you're moving. You
Mhm.
know, it-
That's frustrating.
it's frustrating. And you may want to tell them, you better get out my face and go to heaven. you know, you because
Can
you're
I
moving. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can I ask you, you mentioned, that people want more, right? And that's one of the questions that our circle talks about. I run this group called Iron Deep, and then we have these 12 guys that I've been walking with this last year. It's the core group of this group, and one of the questions that we'll ask is it okay to want more? Um, can you kind of just talk about that a little bit more? Is it okay to want more?
Absolutely. I'm penning my fifth book right now, and it's called Christianity, the other political party. And I'm in a section that's called Affluence versus Influence.
Hmm.
And affluence is not a bad thing. Yeah. Uh, Once you recognize what comes with affluence, the desire that God has given man desires, and you can't get away from your desires. But desires without discipline leads to destruction.
Hmm.
So there must be some discipline attached to your desires. And if you want more, because you feel that more is going to finally give you the financial security that you're looking for. Well, once again, is the faith being revealed or exposed?
Hmm.
If you want more because you are addicted to the entitlement and the excess of life of your desires, that could be an issue. But if you balance that with influence, if you you know take some of that more and balance it, to advocate in the advocacy. Third John tells us that as your soul prospers, may you also prosper and be in good health. And in my interpretation, there's a symbiotic relationship with wealth and advocacy. There's a relationship between wealth, and looking out for those who are not as fortunate.
Hmm. No, that's good. That's good. I'm writing down the just affluence versus influence, and that sounds like a great chapter. Um, some people can also get addicted to influence. I think if
Yes.
it's for the wrong reasons, right? I'm sure you might know some pastors maybe have gotten addicted to influence. Maybe I don't know.
Well,
Could be.
what you just said there, it reveals the 24-hour, 7-day a week um, enemy that we have.
Hmm.
And many people always talk about spiritual warfare. And the reality is that, you're born into it. It never goes away.
Hmm.
You are constantly fighting. And what are you fighting? You're fighting the sin within you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not fighting an external fight, you're fighting an internal fight. My last book in the corporate Christiancy was called The Hidden War. And so it's a war with on the inside. And you're fighting that fight on a daily basis. So influence can get caught up with ego and narcissism and worship me and I did all these things for you, and then the quid pro quo, these kinds of things there. So
Hmm.
you have to always be aware, at least I try to be aware of the steps that I take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you do it long enough, it becomes easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And everything, yeah, flows from the heart. And it's funny how you wrote that book, The Hidden War, because I wrote a book a couple years ago called The Secret War Within. So very, very much about. It was more of an allegory,
Mhm.
but it was a story about a man who was having these. He was a very successful man, a very, but you could in the book you could see what's going on, this battle inside of himself,
Right,
flesh
right.
and all that. So I want to talk about that. You wrote this book, or you talk about this hidden war. I want to talk about because a lot of us too, as in my circles, we want to grow as men and we want to grow spiritually, and then um, you talk about there's this thing with theological and then psychological selves. I want to talk about like maybe the self-help culture and like men want to grow and develop, and there's so much stuff out there that talks about how to grow and the self-help, and here's the list of things that you have to do, but then there's grow spiritually and then in the biblical ways. Can you talk about all of that, and what do you take on the cultural help growth, right? And here's the ways to grow in our culture versus the spiritual growth has other possibly ideas, and some of them really commingle too and come together. So talk to us about that with you in those two things.
I look at the theology, theo, God, ology, study of, and psychology, psycho, man, ology, study of. I look at that as a law firm where theology is a senior partner and psychology is a junior partner
Hmm.
working for the same firm. So there is a coexistence there. But the theology impacts the psychology to keep it faithful to the mission of the
Mm-hmm.
firm,
Mm.
in essence. And at the end of the day, the theology is that God is not asking us to do anything in faith to earn His love or trust. That's given automatically. That was given at the cross. It's an obedience and a faithfulness to that He's looking for. He says, "Love the Lord thy God all thy heart, soul, and thy neighbor likewise." So when you want to grow spiritually, you start there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simplest thing to do, to say, but the hardest thing to do. You know, and you try not to analyze it. I have some psychiatrists and psychologists in my congregation, and they always come with these questions, and I answer the best I can, to bring to that resonates with them. But at the same time, there comes a point where you have to listen to the spirit and not the brain, in
Mhm.
a sense.
Yeah.
And you have to trust, and which means there has to be some trust in the theology that you're
Mhm.
dealing with.
Yeah.
And you have to have the one thing that our society fights hard against:
Mm.
patience.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
You have to be patient when it comes to the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
Have to be patient
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So you can coexist in doing the things that you want to do for yourself and building your businesses. But at the same time, you can't guilt yourself and saying, I'm not doing enough for God,
Mm.
because God is not requiring any of those things. He's requiring you.
Mm. No, it's good. That's good. I have a situation with my family, and I want to just piggyback on this a little bit. So I have children. I have 4 kids. And 2 of the boys are struggling with some mental types of things, and so one part of me, and I I know God can do all things, and He could have a miracle happen, to really help them, right? But the other side too is there's some things that I need maybe do with a psychiatrist or a psychologist to help develop some of the behaviors. So and that's why I think sometimes there is um you know, you start with the theology, but there are also some things that we still need to do, and not just to pray that for healing, right? Can you piggyback on that a little bit more? Because that's something I think personally is like, hey, I'm praying, but this is not typically happening, go in this direction. So I need to be a doer too.
Well, here's where pastoral counseling comes in. And
Hmm.
this is one of the things that I graduated from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary, and I have a master's degree in pastoral counseling. In my chaplaincy career, I held group counseling sessions, clinical counseling sessions. I've even I have a nonprofit, Owen's Ministries, and we started something called First Responders to Life,
Hmm.
where I teach pastors, police officers, early childhood educators how to recognize the 40 different disorders that every human being suffers from,
Hmm.
every one of them. And it can, from anger to xenophobia, and everything in between.
Hmm.
And every last one, you'll find somebody in the Bible who suffered from that,
Hmm.
and what the scripture says about that. And it can be, you know, if people are dealing with drugs, well, we know that drugs is an escape. People tend to don't like their reality, so they go to an alternate reality where life is better. And there's counseling questions to ask, and that, and if it's becomes severe enough, then you ask the family some questions as well, and there. But one of the things that we try not to do, and I don't attack secular counseling,
Hmm.
but in solution focused pastoral counseling, we focus on the problem, yes, but we give the solution just as much attention, because what we try to do is, in regular counseling, we talk about the issue, we talk about how the issue affects you, we talk about, what are you going to do with this issue, and the issue becomes the central part of the conversation, and the
Hmm.
central part of the person's life, and the central part of the person's family's life.
Hmm.
What's not part of their family's life, and remember, I like liberate people,
Hmm.
is the solution.
Hmm.
And if I give you a solution, and it begins to work, the funny thing about a solution, it becomes very consuming. And if the mind now starts to get focused and consumed on the solution, and not the issue, there's self healing going on there.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying it applies for everything, but it applies for most of the things that people say that they have a mental health problem with.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, mental health is really if you have some chemical disorders and schizophrenia is going on. But if
Mhm.
you're having issues and you're upset or you didn't get hugged enough and these kinds of things, I mean, you may act out a little bit, but there's solutions around that you can walk yourself. And my methodology is not to get your head above the water, but get you out the water on the riverbank,
Mhm.
on your own 2 feet,
Mhm.
walk alongside you, and then let you realize that you're walking on your own.
Mhm. No, that's good. That's
I don't
good.
know if that helped, but I mean
It does.
that's kind of what I've kind of been involved in.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, so many times, even in counseling sessions and things like that, you constantly just focus on the problem and and not the solution. So no,
Yeah.
that's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to shift it a little bit. So, um, you know, again, you've written so many great things. I want to talk about uh real quick. Let's talk about this. Um, the role of the church in social justice. You've written some things about this and like American Christianity. So we're talking about Western,
Mm.
Christianity, and you talked about a book, American Christianity, Black Liberation, White Legalism, and then the church's role in societal issues. I want to talk about that. Obviously, this has been a huge for forever, obviously, or I mean, as long as but it's really popping up a lot in the media and things like that. Obviously, a lot. Can you talk about your role in this? Because a lot of times, again, at least my church, they really shy away from talking about some of that those issues in our world or political issues too, right? So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we have been called to be in the world, right?
Hmm.
We've been called to go out into the world, and we have a 25 or 2,800 year legacy of being in the world. And I don't want to bore you with you know the apostolic and the sub-apostolic eras of the church and there. But what I will say to you is that there was a time in the church where around the 1400s, where in Spain, the the papal bull sent a decree was sent out, and it helped Ebenezer at the time, which is Spain now, with something that we now call the African slave trade, and a couple years later, it ushered in the transatlantic slave trade, uh, specifically to the Caribbean, because of something this crop that I think that there's the one crop that has caused more damage and caused more human suffering than any other crop in the world. That's sugarcane.
Mm,
You know, sugarcane was great for Europe. It was found to be a stimulant for working factories. It was great for chocolate, and tea and everything else, and addictions and stuff like that. And that labor force did well. And then it moved up into the Americas where we found tobacco and rice and everything in that process there. And one of the things with the church is when we talk about Black liberation, when we talk about those who were enslaved, and we talk those who were indentured servants and stuff like that. But then, we talk about legalism. And in America was founded because people wanted to get away from the legalism or the right to rule
mm,
that the British and the European monarchies operate under. And they use the scripture, God reigns in the kingdom of heaven, whom he sets up. So in other words, that, God set me up. So it's me and my family. So after me, it'll be my sons and my sons and my sons. And we saw that play out in history, and even in some of the biblical texts of Solomon and what happened after he died and the fight who would rule and that the kingdom divided. So we see this right to rule. Now, when you come from this premise of right to rule, that's a premise of arrogancy there because it's a premise of entitlement.
mm,
And when you have this premise of entitlement, there is an indifference to the people that you're ruling, and that kind of filters out compassion and empathy for that process. And when you look at the transatlantic slave trade, when you look at, America's history with slavery and stuff like that, at the end of the day, it wasn't a hatred. It became that, but really, what it was profit over people,
Mm.
uh, and that's the biggest, clearest sign of indifference. You know, when you put profits over people, when profits become more important than people, you're walking on a slippery slope in your Christian faith there. So you either can do what most churches do. Well, I'm going to focus in on God, you know, and because that doesn't apply, but it does apply.
Mm.
You know, you know, God said that His word is the living water for life. You know, it's supposed to. You're supposed to put it everywhere, and it will be. We are change agents for good, and we have this vessel, this treasure in earthen vessels that can go into any situation and transform it if it's done properly. There, and we're so afraid to use it. So, some because of guilt, some because you'll have churches saying, "Oh my God, I don't want to go there because they'll look at me and say that." And of course they'll say that because people are hurt. You know,
Mhm.
I tell a lot of corporate leaders that you have problems on you in your organizations of bitterness and unfairness and anger. And I said, in any other situation, you would invest resources to where that problem is. When it comes to human beings, you don't tackle it. So you'll talk about joy at work. How can we get along? You won't deal with conflict resolution
Mhm.
because conflict resolution is solved by people wanting to be heard, and then they would like to see some things put in place so that it doesn't happen to them or anybody else again. And that takes away 80% of the pain, and the anger that one they were heard. Something was done to me.
Mhm.
I'm looking, and the Bible calls it justice. Now, me getting justice doesn't mean that you have to be punished, or you get injustice doesn't mean I have to be punished in the
Mhm.
biblical realm of things. Especially when you're talking about 4, 5, 600 years later.
Yes. No, I like how you put that. I mean, you very simplified it down. I mean, obviously this is a heavy, heavy topic, but I think that um, as soon as you have the heart posture of you have the right to rule, um, then when that entitlement kind of comes in, then obviously that's a hard issue. And then as soon as you start to think about profit over people, that's where
You know,
things
and
go
and
downhill.
and and I'll tell you, this is not germane to America.
Yeah.
In the 70s and 80s, there was a man named Roger Mugabe, and Mugabe was in a country called Rhodesia, British colonial empire, and he was an African nationalist. You know, and he felt that in his country, Africans were the majority, and they should run it.
Mhm.
And there was a civil war. He fought Ian Smith and those guys, and he took over, and he started to do the same things. And tell me if it sounds familiar. He started to deport people, white people out the country. He started seizing farms because he said you stole it from people 200, 300 years ago.
Mhm.
He did all that stuff, and the world got in uproars, and they started sanctioning him. But not only did they sanction him, in his behavior, he almost bankrupted his country because he was putting people in charge of things that they had no experience and they
Mm.
couldn't run. They
Mhm.
couldn't farm, they couldn't sell this and that, and it started to hurt their society. Then he had to go back, and bring those people and say, "Hey, give them back their stuff," and try to find a happy medium. So what we do, if we don't listen to history, we're going to repeat it. The thing, it just doesn't work like that. We
Yeah.
have to come together to find a way to get past conflict resolution. I mean, there's enough at this pie for everybody in a sense. And I don't want to talk like I'm pie in the sky
Mhm.
because everybody's always going to be, looking at my pie compared to their pie.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Because even God is not fair in that aspect. That parable about you started at 6, I started at 2, we got the same denaro.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, well, what's the bishop? You got what you got paid for, and I got what I got paid for. Why you worry about how much time I spent?
Right.
The sin nature in us that we have to overcome,
Yeah.
that keeps us in this back and forth.
Mm. Yes. And you mentioned, so you started going kind of international, and what some of these other countries in the history have done. And I know you've done some training, some seminars in South Africa. You have some international experience. I'm always fascinated by uh, internationally what some of the other churches are doing internationally versus what we're doing in America. Is there something that we can learn? And I think that a lot of times other countries try to mimic what we're doing here because, whether it's movies or our churches and how we're conducting church. And maybe some of these other countries even trying to copy us, but I don't even know if that's right. Can you did you learn anything as a pastor from some of the way some of these other countries are doing church
Yeah,
and
I
ministry?
when I travel, I don't operate in the performance gospel.
Mm,
I don't go to entertain, and I try to be boring. So I don't. I'm a pastor wherever I go, and I can preach with the best of them, but I don't. That's not my mission there. My mission is to go to deal with take South Africa. South Africa at one time, probably still not so much anymore, but I'm not quite sure the number since the pandemic. But it was a place that had the highest rate per capita and the lowest convictions. It also is functionally illiterate there.
mm,
High HIV. Well, if I go there and I hoop and holler and preach the gospel to you and make you feel happy, you know, well, I did that for me.
mm,
Why am I there? So I took this methodology and I had counseling, I had training sessions with social workers, early childhood educators, police officers, and we were getting ready to go into the military. And I didn't want to do pastors, but they got mad at me. So I had it with pastors as well. And in my sessions, training people to recognize those disorders. And my second day at St. John's Episcopal John Wesley compound, where they had this massive daycare center in the township of Entwata, four social workers, young people, raised their hands and wanted to talk about suicide.
mm.
And they said, then this, well, I tried to kill myself 3 weeks ago, Pastor. And I tried to kill myself last week. I tried to do it last night. And the director stood up and she couldn't believe it. And that training session turned into an intervention with me and them in front of everybody. You know,
Well,
so they can get some, relief, and so at least they could understand wh- what's going on in their lives and where they can identify what's hopeful, you know, and where they can kind of now focus, and be consumed with this solution that I'm giving them. Now that happened in a lunchroom with 50 people
hmm,
in a daycare center. And I'll send you the emails of the pictures and stuff like that.
yeah, that'd be
And
awesome.
and that changed me. It changed me because, you know, no longer was pulpit preaching my priority,
Hmm.
or raising tithes and offerings. People are hurting everywhere, and you have to be sensitive to be able to help them. And they come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and genders.
Yes, no, for sure. That's an awesome story. I love to see those pictures.
Mhm.
Yes, you don't know when those opportunities are going to rise.
And I didn't go there
As
for that. I
Yeah,
went there to
yeah,
to teach a class.
right. Yes, definitely. Uh, I want to. Last question is this. So you've obviously done a lot, written a lot of books, and in the corporate Christian series, um, you've been a husband for 30 plus years, proud father, and you talk about kind of maximizing moments. And I think I want to just talk to this about being a doer of the word instead of just a hearer of the word. And I want you to talk about that in our audience a little bit, because again, I think that we all fall into the trap of just the rhythms of hearing the word and not doers of the word. Can you talk about that to our audience as we wrap up?
When I was coming up as a little boy, a little pup, I was always told that if you write something down, or if you write "see spot run" 10 times, you will learn how to write it, and it will stick with you the rest of your life.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm 62, so um, that's when we call it reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? Um, I look at the Gospels the same way. If I am only a hearer and a pontificator and a prognosticator of the word, and I'm not doing the word, then I don't know the word. You know, I can regurgitate the word, but I don't know the word. But if I go out there and realize that, you know, the word that I'm living is sacrificial, it's service, you know, and it's going to once again reveal or expose my motivations and my intentions there. And if I'm trying to live this life that I may hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant, then I better roll up my sleeves. And then on top of that, once you start to become a doer of the word, you start to realize how many more laborers you need. You can't do it all by
Yes.
yourself. You don't have enough
Yes.
money. I have been broke so many times because of this faith. You know, I have gone into my pensions. You know, yeah, I'm a little bit above scarcity now. I have to balance myself out a little bit, but I am so broke in just doing stuff for the gospel, for the kingdom.
Mm, mm,
I've retired from there. I live in Pflugerville, Texas. Uh, I do a little Uber every morning. It stays off dementia. It's the
mm,
best part of ministry in my life because in that car we have some great, great conversations with people.
mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you won't believe the conversations we have. You know, my wife and I, we people don't even meet. And Texas is very hot. We A young man and his baby and wife were under a highway, and my wife put them in a hotel for 6 weeks.
Well,
It wasn't cheap. And
no.
then there was another kid sitting there getting ready to leave. She called me, and I put him in a hotel for 7 weeks.
Well,
He turned out to be a pretty good chef. He's on TikTok now. Yeah.
well.
So, but it costs money, and
Yeah.
you don't know them from Adam. I don't know, what will happen with that, but it's an investment in the kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. That's awesome. Well, so many amazing stories, and I hope my audience, you guys out there, if you're listening to this, yeah, just to take this to heart. And so many great things. People over profit, right? I just think that's one thing that just kept coming back to me, and I think I've said that before. Is just even I think even as I lead my company, like, hey, people over profit, right? Take care of people. So that's so cool. Well, Pastor Owen, I appreciate you being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. If someone's interested in getting just more information about you, your books, any place they can go to for that.
Well, I have a website. It's www.oewilliamsministries.com. It's encrypted, so it has that HTTP thing, so you're not gonna get hacked and stuff like that in there. And my email is owilliams193 at gmail.com. Owilliams193 at gmail.com. And at that website, you can get the books and stuff there. And it's one of those tabs at the top takes you to the bookstore, and you can pick it up there if you want. It takes you to Amazon. Yeah.
Awesome. No, that sounds great. We're going to put that in our show notes, guys, and our YouTube channel, or you can check it out at irondeep.com and all the show notes there. So thank you, Pastor Williams. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
I really, really enjoy talking to you, Brad. You really, really, this is your calling. I don't know what you do in real estate, but this is it. So
No, well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
See you.
We'll see you guys next time.